Ever been unfairly judged at an airport? What if the gate agent who blocks you from boarding, dripping with condescension, has no idea who they're messing with? Today's story is a jaw-dropping account of airport drama at its peak. A black man casually dressed is rudely denied early boarding by an overzealous gate agent. Little does she know her next move will not only infuriate him, but also give him the power to cancel her entire flight and possibly her career in minutes. This isn't just a passenger complaint. This is a reckoning served ice cold by the airport director himself. Buckle up. The air in Terminal C of Newark Liberty International Airport was thick with the usual Monday morning cocktail of anxiety, stale coffee, and the faint metallic scent of jet fuel. Flight 498 to San Francisco was already posting a 20-minute delay, and the atmosphere around gate C127 was beginning to simmer. Passengers milled about their faces, illuminated by the blue glow of their phone screens. A collective sigh almost audible beneath the din of announcements and rolling suitcases. Marcus Thorne, dressed in a pair of well-worn but impeccably clean jeans, a simple dark grey t-shirt that hinted at a gym-toned physique, and a pair of expensive-looking yet understated Horween leather sneakers, approached the boarding lane. A lightweight, unbranded travel backpack was slung over one shoulder. He looked like any other traveler, perhaps a tech guy heading to the West Coast, comfortable and unassuming. He held his boarding pass Zone 1 clearly visible on his phone screen, along with his identification. The pre-boarding announcement had just crackled over the PA system. We now invite our active-duty military personnel families traveling with children under the age of 6 and passengers requiring special assistance to begin pre-boarding for Flight 498 to San Francisco. Marcus, who qualified for pre-boarding due to a chronic knee issue from an old college football injury, an invisible ailment he rarely drew attention to, but appreciated the airline's accommodation for, moved towards the priority lane. He wasn't trying to be first, just to settle in before the general stampede, a small mercy that made the difference between a tolerable flight and 5 hours of increasing discomfort. Blocking his path like a bulldog guarding a prized bone was gate agent Brenda Mulroney. Brenda, a woman whose expression seemed permanently etched in a state of mild to moderate irritation, had a reputation among her colleagues for being a stickler for rules, or at least her interpretation of them. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin around her eyes, giving her a perpetually surprised and somewhat aggressive look. Today, with the delay and the mounting pressure, her fuse was particularly short. As Marcus approached, Brenda's eyes swept over him, a quick, dismissive appraisal that lingered for a fraction of a second too long on his casual attire. Her lips, coated in a shade of fiery red lipstick that seemed to amplify her mood, tightened. "Sir," she began, her voice carrying a sharp, nasal tone that cut through the low hum of the gate area. "Pre-boarding is for passengers needing special assistance, active military, and families with young children only." She didn't look at his phone, didn't ask to see his boarding pass. Her gaze was fixed on his face, challenging. Marcus offered a polite, almost weary smile. He'd encountered this before, this subtle gatekeeping, this instant judgment. "Good morning. Yes, I understand. I qualify for pre-boarding." He held up his phone, the Zone 1 designation clearly visible. "My pass reflects that." Brenda barely glanced at the screen. "Sir, Zone 1 is after pre-boarding. Pre-boarding is for those who genuinely need it." The emphasis on genuinely was unmistakable, laden with insinuation. She gestured vaguely towards a family with a stroller and a man in a wheelchair who were already making their way down the jet bridge. "As you can see, those passengers are currently boarding." A prickle of annoyance ran down Marcus's spine, but years of navigating far more treacherous boardrooms and political landscapes had taught him the value of measured calm. "I assure you I do qualify. Perhaps you could scan my pass." Brenda crossed her arms. Her name badge. Brenda M. Customer Service. Professional. Glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. The irony was not lost on Marcus. "Look, sir," she said, her voice rising slightly, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. "I've been doing this for 15 years. I know who qualifies and who's just trying to get on early to snag overhead bin space." Her eyes flicked to his backpack. If everyone who said they needed special assistance actually did, we'd never get off the ground. The implication was clear. He was lying, trying to game the system. Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his chest. It wasn't just about pre-boarding anymore. It was about the casual disrespect the snap judgment based on. What his clothes, the color of his skin. He was a black man in jeans and a t-shirt. Did that automatically disqualify him from needing assistance, or for that matter from being a premium passenger? "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice still even, but now carrying a distinct edge of firmness. "I'm not trying to snag anything. I have a legitimate reason for pre-boarding which is reflected by my ticket status issued by your airline. I would appreciate it if you would simply scan my pass or check your manifest." A few passengers nearby began to openly stare. An older white woman tutted audibly, shaking her head in Marcus's direction as if he were a petulant child. A young man with headphones around his neck smirked, clearly amused by the confrontation. But Marcus also noticed a couple of other passengers, a black woman in business attire and a younger white man, looking uncomfortable, their expressions sympathetic. Brenda, however, seemed to thrive on the confrontation, her face flushing slightly. "And I would appreciate it if you would step aside and wait for your zone to be called, sir. Unless you can show me a visible disability or military ID, you're holding up the line for people who actually need help." She puffed herself up, her posture becoming more rigid. "I'm the one in charge of this gate, and I decide who boards when." The blatant unprofessionalism was galling. Marcus knew he could end this, quickly reveal who he was. But that wasn't the point. This wasn't about him pulling rank. It was about a fundamental failure of service, of respect, of basic decency. He wanted to see how far she would take this. "So to be clear," Marcus stated, his voice dangerously quiet, "you are refusing to verify my legitimately assigned boarding priority because of your personal assessment of my appearance." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "I am refusing to let you board out of turn because you do not meet the stated criteria for pre-boarding that I just announced. Now, are you going to step aside, or do I need to call airport security to escort you from the gate area? We already have a delay, and I don't need you causing further issues." The threat hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Calling security. For asking to board with his assigned priority. Marcus looked at Brenda, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. It was a look that had unsettled CEOs and unnerved union leaders. It was a look that promised consequences. "That won't be necessary, Brenda," he said, his use of her first name plucked from her name tag deliberate. "But I assure you this conversation is far from over." He didn't move immediately, holding her gaze for another beat, letting his disappointment and resolve settle in the space between them. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he stepped back from the boarding lane, not into the general waiting area, but slightly to the side near the customer service desk. He pulled out his phone, not to idly scroll, but to make a call that Brenda Mulroney, in her 15 years of service, could never have anticipated. The low hum of the gate area continued, but for Marcus Thorne, The delay of Flight 498 to San Francisco had just become the least of his concerns. The gears were already turning. Brenda Mulroney watched Marcus Thorne step away, a smirk of triumph playing on her lips. She felt a small rush of vindication. Another entitled passenger put in his place. She turned back to the remaining pre-boarding passengers, her voice regaining its forced cheerfulness. "All right, folks, let's keep it moving. Welcome aboard." She avoided looking in Marcus's direction, though she was acutely aware of him standing near the service desk, his back partially turned, his phone pressed to his ear. Probably complaining to his mommy, she thought dismissively. Marcus, however, was not calling his mother. His first call was brief, his voice low and measured, yet carrying an undeniable weight of authority to the person on the other end. "Sarah, it's Marcus Thorne. I'm at Gate C127 Newark, Flight 498 to San Francisco. I've encountered a significant customer service and procedural issue with the gate staff here. I need you to connect me to Dave McMillan, Airline Operations VP, immediately, and then get me Sylvia Rourke at Port Authority." "Yes, it's that serious." He listened for a moment, then nodded. "Understood. Patch McMillan through to my cell as soon as you have him." He disconnected and then immediately dialed another number. Meanwhile, Brenda, feeling the need to solidify her position, decided to call her direct supervisor, Gary Parsons. Gary was a man who generally preferred to avoid confrontation and often relied on his more assertive gate agents like Brenda to handle the difficult passengers. He managed the cluster of sea gates from a small, cluttered office tucked away behind a bank of check-in counters. "Gary, it's Brenda at C137, she said into her own headset, her voice laced with a carefully curated tone of beleaguered professionalism. "Just had a bit of an incident. A passenger, a Mr. Thorne, was trying to push his way into pre-boarding, claimed he qualified but clearly didn't fit any of the criteria. Got quite agitated when I told him he'd have to wait for his zone. I had to threaten to call security." She conveniently omitted her own condescending remarks and her refusal to even scan his boarding pass. Gary sighed on the other end. "All right, Brenda. Is he still there? Is he causing a scene?" "No. He backed off," Brenda replied, glancing over at Marcus, who was now speaking again on his phone, his expression unreadable. "He's just loitering by the desk now, probably sulking. But I wanted you to be aware in case he tries to make some frivolous complaint." "Good job, Brenda," Gary said, his voice relieved. "You know the drill. Stick to the policy. Don't let these premium flyers bully you just because they bought a slightly more expensive ticket. If he didn't have a visible need or the right credentials, you did the right thing. We're already delayed. Can't have people making things worse." "My thoughts exactly, Gary." "Thanks." Feeling validated, Brenda disconnected her confidence, bolstered. She and Gary had an understanding. They were the front line, the defenders of order against the chaotic demands of the traveling public. A few feet away, Marcus was now speaking to Dave McMillan, the airline's vice president of operations. "Dave Marcus Thorne. I trust Sarah filled you in on the basics." McMillan's voice, usually booming and self-assured, was tinged with concern. "Marcus, yes, she did. What on earth is happening at C127? Are you all right?" McMillan knew Thorne not just as a frequent flyer, but as a significant figure within the aviation ecosystem. Their paths had crossed at industry conferences and high-level planning meetings. "I'm fine, Dave. But your gate agent, a Brenda Mulroney, and it appears her immediate supervisor, a Gary Parsons, are not. I was denied pre-boarding, to which I am entitled based on a visual assessment by Agent Mulroney. She refused to scan my pass, became accusatory, and threatened me with security when I politely insisted." Marcus recounted the exchange concisely, his tone factual but steely. Frankly, Dave, it was one of the worst displays of customer service and blatant profiling I've witnessed in a long time at any airport. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Macmillan knew Thorne wasn't prone to exaggeration. Marcus, I am appalled. Absolutely appalled. This is not our standard. This is not how we operate. Well, Dave, Marcus countered, his voice cool. It's how you're operating at gate C-127 this morning, and I have to wonder if this is an isolated incident or indicative of a broader training and oversight issue within your Newark ground staff. I'll get to the bottom of this immediately, Marcus. I'm going to call the Newark station manager right now. We'll get this rectified. Please allow me to personally apologize. An apology is a start, Dave, but we're past that for the moment, Marcus interrupted. I'm less concerned about my own inconvenience now, and more concerned about the operational integrity and passenger treatment protocols at this gate. I'm also waiting on a call from Sylvia Rourke. Mentioning Sylvia Rourke, the formidable Deputy Executive Director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. The very organization that ran Newark Liberty International Airport sent a jolt through Macmillan. This had escalated far beyond a simple passenger complaint. This was now an institutional matter. I understand, Macmillan said, his voice now tight with urgency. What do you need from us right now? For now, Dave, I need you to have your Newark station manager meet me at gate C-127, discreetly, and I need all documentation related to Agent Mulroney's and Supervisor Parsons' training performance reviews and any prior passenger complaints for the last 2 years, pulled and ready for review. I also want the CCTV footage from this gate area for the last hour. Consider it done, Marcus. I am so sorry you've had to experience this. As Marcus disconnected from Macmillan, he saw a figure hurrying down the concourse towards gate C-127. A man in a slightly rumpled airline suit, his face pale and anxious. This was Tom Bradley, the airline's Newark station manager, no doubt already feeling the heat from Macmillan's furious call. Brenda, still managing the boarding process for Zone 1, noticed Bradley approaching. She gave him a quick professional nod, assuming he was there for a routine check, or perhaps because of the delay. She saw him scan the gate area, his eyes landing on Marcus, who was now ending another call. Bradley approached Marcus with a hesitant, deferential air. Mr. Thorne, I'm Tom Bradley, the station manager for United here at Newark. I was just alerted by Mr. Macmillan. Please accept my sincerest apologies for what you've experienced this morning. Before Marcus could respond, another figure arrived, this one exuding an aura of unmistakable authority that made even Bradley straighten up. She was a woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit. Her expression serious and focused. This was Sylvia Rourke, Deputy Executive Director of the Port Authority. With her were 2 other individuals in Port Authority uniforms, looking official and observant. Brenda watched, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. Why was the station manager apologizing to this man? And who was this woman who made everyone else look like they were shrinking Gary, who had decided to wander over from his office to check on things and perhaps offer a supportive word to Brenda, arrived just in time to witness the scene unfolding? He saw Bradley almost bowing to the man Brenda had dismissed, and then he saw Sylvia Rourke. Gary felt a sudden icy dread creep up his spine. He'd seen Rourke's picture in internal Port Authority bulletins. She was very, very senior. Sylvia Rourke walked directly to Marcus, extending her hand. Marcus, so sorry to hear you've had to deal with this. Sarah briefed me. Are you okay? Her voice was warm, but carried an undertone of controlled anger. Marcus shook her hand. Sylvia, thanks for coming so quickly. I'm fine. Just disappointed. Brenda's jaw had gone slack. Her mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. Marcus Thorne, Sylvia Rourke, Port Authority. The pieces were clicking into place with horrifying speed. This wasn't just some disgruntled passenger. This was someone important. Gary, standing beside Brenda, looked like he'd seen a ghost. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by a sickly green pallor. Sylvia turned her gaze cool and appraising, first to Bradley, then to Brenda and Gary. "Mr. Bradley, I assume you're aware of the situation." "Yes, Ms. Rourke," Bradley stammered. "I was just beginning to address it with Mr. Thorne." Sylvia then looked directly at Brenda, her eyes like chips of ice. "Agent Mulroney, is it?" Brenda could only nod, her throat suddenly dry. The fiery red lipstick now seemed garish against her paling face. "Mr. Thorne informs me," Sylvia continued, her voice dangerously soft, "that you denied him pre-boarding, refused to verify his credentials, and threatened him with security, all based on your visual assessment of his eligibility." Brenda opened her mouth, then closed it. What could she possibly say? The casual arrogance she'd displayed minutes ago had curdled into pure fear. She looked at Gary for help, but he was staring resolutely at his shoes, as if hoping the floor would swallow him. Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of his office. "Mr. Bradley, Ms. Rourke, perhaps we can step into the jet bridge or your local office for a moment. It seems Flight 498 might be further delayed. Because before anyone else boards this aircraft, I need to understand how one of your gate agents, supported by her supervisor, felt empowered to engage in such unprofessional and discriminatory behavior." He paused, then added, looking pointedly at Brenda and Gary, "And I need to understand if this is a symptom of a larger problem at Newark." He then looked at Sylvia Rourke and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Sylvia, I am formally requesting in my capacity as Director of Aviation for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, a full and immediate review of this airline's ground crew procedures training and oversight at this terminal, starting with Gate C127. Director of Aviation. The title hung in the air like a death knell. Brenda Mulroney felt the blood drain from her face. Her legs suddenly felt weak. The man she had belittled, threatened, and dismissed as a nobody, the man in the jeans and t-shirt trying to snag overhead bin space, wasn't just a passenger. He was effectively the landlord of the entire airport. He held the power to scrutinize, to investigate, and if necessary to enact changes that could affect every airline operating there. Gary Parsons looked up, his eyes wide with terror, finally understanding the colossal magnitude of their blunder. He had backed the wrong horse, and now the entire stable was under threat. The other passengers, those still waiting and watching, began to murmur. The earlier smirks were gone, replaced by wide eyes and dropped jaws. They had just witnessed a masterclass in quiet authority, and the public downfall of a gate agent who had let her personal biases dictate her professional conduct. The drama at Gate C127 was only just beginning, and the ripples were about to spread far and wide. The air in the small, windowless airline operations office, hastily commandeered near Gate C127, was thick with unspoken accusations and palpable tension. Marcus Thorne sat at one end of a cheap laminate table. Sylvia Rourke beside him, a picture of stern composure. Tom Bradley, the airline's Newark station manager, paced nervously near a water cooler, occasionally dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief, despite the cool temperature of the room. Two of Sylvia's Port Authority aides stood discreetly by the door, their presence a silent reminder of the official nature of this impromptu summit. Outside, the passengers of Flight 498 were growing increasingly agitated. The departure board had flickered from delayed to further delay, awaiting information. A vague pronouncement that did little to soothe frayed nerves. Whispers and rumors were starting to circulate. A security issue, a mechanical problem, a VIP meltdown. The truth unfolding in the cramped office was far more potent. "Mr. Bradley." Marcus began, his voice calm but resonant. "I want to understand the culture here. Is it standard practice for your gate agents to make boarding decisions based on visual profiling? Is it acceptable for them to escalate a simple query into a threat of involving security without even attempting to verify a passenger's credentials?" Bradley stopped pacing. "Absolutely not, Mr. Thorne, Ms. Rourke. What you experienced is an aberration. It is not reflective of our training, our policies, or our values. We pride ourselves on customer service, on treating every passenger with respect." His words sounded hollow, rehearsed. Sylvia Rourke interjected, her tone sharp. "An aberration that involved not one, but apparently two of your staff members, Mr. Bradley, the agent Ms. Mulroney and her supervisor Mr. Parsons, who I understand validated her actions without proper inquiry. I am still gathering all the facts regarding Mr. Parsons' involvement," Bradley stammered, clearly out of his depth. "But I can assure you we will conduct a thorough internal investigation. There will be accountability." Marcus leaned forward. "Accountability is essential, Tom. But so is immediate corrective action. This isn't just about my experience. How many other passengers, perhaps those less equipped or less willing to challenge an aggressive gate agent, have been subjected to this kind of treatment? How many have been humiliated, inconvenienced, or made to feel unwelcome because they didn't look the part in someone's biased estimation?" His phone buzzed. It was a text from Dave McMillan, the airline VP. "CCTV footage from C-127 secured. Preliminary review of Mulroney's file shows 2 prior informal complaints regarding rudeness. 1 formal complaint for aggressive tone. All dismissed by local management with coaching. Parsons has a clean file, but is noted for delegating conflict resolution. Full files en route to your Port Authority email." Marcus absorbed the information. Coaching, he thought. A euphemism for a slap on the wrist. "I want Agent Mulroney and Supervisor Parsons brought in here." Marcus stated not as a request, but as an expectation. "Separately." Bradley nodded quickly and spoke into his radio. Within minutes, a visibly shaken Brenda Mulroney was escorted in by one of Sylvia's aides. Her fiery red lipstick seemed to have smudged, and her eyes were wide and darting. The earlier bravado was gone, replaced by a desperate, hunted look. "Ms. Mulroney," Sylvia began, her voice devoid of warmth. "Please sit. We want to hear your account of the events at gate C-127 this morning involving Mr. Thorne." Brenda sat perched on the edge of a chair, her hands twisting in her lap. I was just following procedure," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "Pre-boarding is for specific categories. He didn't look like he qualified." "He didn't look like he qualified?" Marcus repeated, his eyebrows arching. "And on what basis did you make that visual assessment, Miss Mulroney? What specific training have you received that allows you to determine medical necessity or passenger status simply by looking at someone?" Brenda flushed. "Well, no specific training for that, but experience. Usually people needing help, you can tell. And he was young, and he was dressed very casually. And he didn't mention any specific issue, just showed his phone. My boarding pass, issued by your airline, clearly indicated Zone 1, which, as you know, often includes passengers who have requested pre-boarding assistance for non-visible reasons," Marcus stated. "Did you attempt to scan it?" The line was building up. We were already delayed. I felt he was trying to argue his way on," Brenda stammered, her gaze fixed on the tabletop. "I told him the rules. You accused him of trying to snag overhead bin space and threatened him with security." Sylvia interjected, her voice like steel. "Is that part of your standard procedure for passengers making a polite inquiry about their boarding status?" Brenda's eyes welled up. "No, I might have gotten a bit flustered. The delays, the pressure. Sometimes passengers can be very demanding." She was trying to paint herself as the victim, overwhelmed by a stressful job. Marcus wasn't buying it. "Ms. Mulroney, was Mr. Thorne demanding? Was he rude? Did he raise his voice before you threatened him?" Brenda hesitated. "Well, no, not exactly, but he was insistent. Insistent on his right to board according to the priority your airline assigned him," Marcus corrected. "A right you summarily denied based on a personal bias." Brenda started to cry, fat tears rolling down her cheeks, leaving streaks in her foundation. "I didn't mean to. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I'm so sorry. Please, I have 2 kids, a mortgage. I can't lose my job." The plea hung in the air. Marcus looked at her, his expression unyielding, but not unkind. "Ms. Mulroney, your personal circumstances are regrettable, but they do not excuse unprofessional conduct, nor do they mitigate the potential for discriminatory behavior to harm passengers and damage the reputation of this airport and the airlines that serve it." She was dismissed, still sniffling, and Gary Parsons was brought in. Gary, unlike Brenda, attempted a different tactic: bluster and deflection. "Mr. Thorne, Ms. Rourke," Gary began, trying for an air of managerial concern. "A complete misunderstanding, I assure you. Brenda can be a bit overzealous at times, but her heart's in the right place. She's dedicated to upholding policy. I had a brief call with her, and she assured me the passenger was being disruptive." "Disruptive?" Marcus cut in, his voice dangerously soft. "Mr. Parsons, I was the passenger. Was I being disruptive when I politely asked for my boarding pass to be scanned? Was I disruptive when I questioned Agent Mulroney's arbitrary decision?" Gary's face paled slightly as the realization of who he was directly contradicting hit him fully. Well, disruptive might have been her interpretation. As a supervisor, I trust my team. If Brenda felt the situation warranted a firm hand. "So you condoned her actions without verifying any facts yourself?" Sylvia asked. "You supported her threat to call security on a passenger who was merely asserting his rights." Gary shifted uncomfortably. "I empower my agents to manage their gates. We were already dealing with a significant delay on Flight 498 due to a late inbound aircraft, and then a minor catering hiccup with Global Delights Catering not delivering the first-class meals on time. Tensions were high. My priority was to prevent further delays." Marcus seized on that. "Prevent further delays, Mr. Parsons. Your and Agent Mulroney's actions have now involved the station manager, the airline's VP of Operations, and the Deputy Executive Director of the Port Authority. This flight is now significantly more delayed than it ever would have been if Agent Mulroney had simply done her job correctly in the first place. How do you reconcile that with your stated priority?" Gary had no answer. He deflated his attempted bravado, vanishing. I see your point, sir. Perhaps I should have intervened differently." "Perhaps you should have," Marcus agreed. He looked at Sylvia, then at Tom Bradley. Mr. Bradley, this is not just about one agent or one supervisor. This is about a systemic failure. The fact that Ms. Mulroney had prior complaints that were effectively dismissed with coaching tells me there's a reluctance to address these issues meaningfully. The fact that Mr. Parsons felt comfortable validating her actions without investigation tells me there's a lack of oversight. He stood up. Flight 498 to San Francisco. What is its current status? Bradley consulted his tablet. We've managed the catering issue, sir. The aircraft is ready. We were hoping to begin boarding as soon as we resolved this. Marcus looked out the small, grimy window of the office, though he couldn't see the gate. He could imagine the scene, though hundreds of frustrated passengers, their plans disrupted their patience wearing thin. This flight crew, specifically the ground staff assigned to this gate, are clearly not in a fit state to manage a boarding process professionally or without bias right now, Marcus declared. They are compromised. Their judgment is compromised, and frankly, my confidence in their ability to ensure a smooth and equitable experience for all passengers on this flight at this moment is zero. He turned back to face them. Mr. Bradley, as Director of Aviation for the Port Authority, I am not ordering you to cancel this flight. That is an operational decision for your airline. However, I am strongly advising you that to proceed with boarding Flight 498, with the current gate staffing under the cloud of this incident, would be ill-advised, and could potentially lead to further passenger grievances and safety concerns if tensions escalate. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Furthermore, I am instructing the Port Authority team here, he gestured to Sylvia's aides, to conduct immediate spot checks and passenger interviews at other gates operated by your airline within this terminal for the remainder of the day. We need to ascertain if this aberration is truly as isolated as you believe. Then came the twist that no one, not even Sylvia, had fully anticipated, though Marcus had been formulating it since Brenda's tearful, self-serving apology. However, Marcus continued, his gaze sweeping over Bradley. Given the extreme nature of the profiling and unprofessionalism I personally experienced, and the clear evidence of systemic failures in training and oversight that allowed this to happen, I am under Port Authority Code of Conduct regulations for airport partners. Temporarily suspending Gate Agent Brenda Mulroney's and Gate Supervisor Gary Parsons' airport-issued security identification and access privileges to secure areas of Newark Liberty International Airport, pending the outcome of your full investigation and our review of that investigation. Gasps were audible. This was more than just an airline disciplinary matter. This was the Port Authority, the airport operator itself, taking direct action. It was a swift, decisive move that cut to the heart of their ability to even work at the airport. Their SIDA badges are to be surrendered to my staff immediately, Marcus instructed. They will be escorted from the premises. They will not work at this airport for any airline until this matter is resolved to the Port Authority's satisfaction. Tom Bradley looked horrified. Mr. Thorne, that's drastic. It will cripple our staffing for the day. We're already short-handed. That is a consequence of the actions of your personnel, Mr. Bradley, Marcus stated firmly. Perhaps it will impress upon your organization the seriousness with which the Port Authority views such matters. You need to find alternate qualified staff to manage your gates who can assure all passengers fair and respectful treatment. Sylvia Rourke nodded in agreement. The Port Authority stands behind Director Thorne's decision. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and gross unprofessionalism from any personnel operating at our facilities. Consider this a very clear message. The message was indeed clear. Brenda Mulroney, who had arrogantly wielded her minor authority to belittle a passenger, now found herself stripped of the very credentials that allowed her to do her job. Gary Parsons, who had passively enabled her behavior, shared her fate. The karma was swift, brutal, and delivered with institutional force. As for Flight 498, Tom Bradley, faced with the PR nightmare of proceeding under these circumstances and the logistical nightmare of restaffing the gate, immediately made the only call he could. In light of these developments, and to ensure we can manage the situation appropriately, he announced, his voice strained, United Airlines will be cancelling Flight 498 to San Francisco today. We will be reaccommodating passengers on the next available flights or offering full refunds. The words, when relayed to the waiting passengers via the PA system, were met with a collective groan that echoed through Terminal C. But for Marcus Thorne, the cancellation was a secondary consequence. The primary goal had been achieved, accountability had begun, and a clear signal had been sent. The ripples from the incident at Gate C-127 were just starting to spread, and they would be felt far beyond the confines of Newark Liberty International Airport. The announcement of Flight 498's cancellation reverberated through Terminal C like a shockwave. Groans of disbelief quickly morphed into a cacophony of outrage. Gate C-127, already a pressure cooker, exploded. Passengers surged towards the podium, demanding answers, their voices a mix of fury and desperation. Business travelers fumed about missed meetings, families about ruined vacations, and everyone about the sheer inconvenience. "What do you mean, cancelled?" A man in a tailored suit yelled, his face red. "I have a multi-million-dollar deal closing in San Francisco this afternoon. My daughter's wedding is tomorrow," a woman cried, tears streaming down her face. "I have to be there." Tom Bradley. The beleaguered station manager suddenly found himself on the front line of a public relations inferno. He had hastily assembled a team of remaining gate agents and customer service representatives, pulling them from other, less critical tasks to manage the rebooking chaos. But they were hopelessly outnumbered and ill-equipped to handle the sheer volume of enraged passengers. Lines snaked back from the counter, tempers flared, and the airline's carefully cultivated image of smooth efficiency was shattering with every passing minute. Amidst this turmoil, two smaller, more personal dramas were reaching their denouement. Brenda Mulroney and Gary Parsons, pale and trembling, were met by two Port Authority police officers and one of Sylvia Rourke's aides just outside the operations office. The aide, a no-nonsense woman named Inspector Diaz, held out her hand. "Ms. Mulroney, Mr. Parsons," Inspector Diaz said, her voice firm but neutral. "As per Director Thorne's instruction, I am here to collect your airport-issued Cider Security Identification Display Area badges. You are to be escorted from the airport premises immediately." Brenda stared at the outstretched hand as if it held a viper. Her CIDA badge was her key, her access, her entire professional identity within the airport ecosystem. Without it, she was just another civilian barred from the secure areas where she'd spent the last 15 years of her life. The reality of her situation crashed down on her with full force. This wasn't just a suspension from the airline pending investigation. This was the airport authority itself evicting her. "No, please," Brenda whispered, her earlier tears returning this time, carrying the acrid taste of genuine despair. "You can't do this. I need this job. I made a mistake, a stupid mistake, but the decision has been made, Miss Mulroney." Inspector Diaz stated, her expression unchanging. "Your badge, please." Gary Parsons, his face ashen, fumbled with the clip on his belt. He was a man who prided himself on his minor managerial authority, on being on the inside. Now he was being publicly stripped of that status. He avoided eye contact with the passing airport employees, some of whom were now openly staring, sensing the gravity of the situation. He unclipped his badge and handed it over his hand, shaking. Brenda, after a moment more of desperate hesitation, did the same. The small plastic card symbols of their access and authority were dropped into a clear evidence bag held by Inspector Diaz. You will be contacted by your airline regarding their internal investigation and any subsequent actions, Diaz informed them. The Port Authority will also be in touch regarding the status of your SIDA privileges pending the outcome of these investigations. For now, officers, please escort Ms. Mulroney and Mr. Parsons to the public exit. The two Port Authority officers stepped forward. There was no aggression, no force, just a quiet, unassailable authority. Brenda let out a choked sob as she was gently guided away, past the curious and sometimes scornful glances of her now former colleagues and the throng of inconvenienced passengers. Gary followed, head bowed, a man utterly broken. The hard karma wasn't just a disciplinary note in a file. It was this public ignominious exit, their careers at Newark Liberty International Airport, effectively over in an instant, their professional reputations in tatters. The swiftness and severity of the consequences were breathtaking. Back in the relative calm of the operations office, Marcus Thorne was already focused on the next steps. "Sylvia," he said, turning to the Deputy Executive Director. "Those spot checks I mentioned, I want them initiated within the hour. I need teams visiting other gates for this airline, and frankly a couple of other major carriers as well. Observe interactions, discreetly interview passengers who look like they might have had an issue. Let's get a snapshot of what's really happening on the ground today. This isn't about a witch hunt. It's about ensuring consistent standards." Sylvia nodded. "Already on it, Marcus. My people are deploying now. We'll focus on boarding procedures, customer interactions at the service desks, and accessibility compliance." She then looked at Tom Bradley, who had just returned to the office, looking like he'd aged a decade in the last hour. "Mr. Bradley," Sylvia said, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Director Thorne and I will require a preliminary report from your airline within 48 hours detailing the initial findings of your internal investigation into Agent Mulroney and Supervisor Parsons, and the immediate steps you are taking to address the training and oversight deficiencies identified. A full report and a comprehensive corrective action plan will be due within 10 business days." Bradley, his voice hoarse, could only nod. "You'll have it, Ms. Rourke, Mr. Thorne. We are taking this with the utmost seriousness. VP Macmillan is flying in this afternoon. He wants to meet with you personally, Mr. Thorne, to offer his apologies again and discuss our path forward." "I'll meet with him," Marcus agreed, "but apologies, while appreciated, won't be enough. We need to see concrete systemic changes. This airport, under the stewardship of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, must be a place where every single traveler feels respected and safe, regardless of their appearance, their attire, or their background." His phone chimed. It was an alert from an aviation news feed. A small headline was already up. "Major delays at Newark EWR. Following flight cancellation. Operational issues cited." The story was still vague, but the digital breadcrumbs were being laid. Marcus knew it wouldn't be long before the real reason, or at least versions of it, started leaking out. The airline had a massive PR fire to contain. As Marcus and Sylvia prepared to leave the gate area, stepping out into the concourse, now teeming with frustrated passengers from Flight 498, and the ripple effect of delayed resources. Marcus paused. He saw the faces, the anger, the exhaustion, the bewilderment. He felt a pang of regret for their disrupted travel, but it was overshadowed by the conviction that his actions, though drastic, were necessary. One of the passengers, an elderly woman in a wheelchair, who had successfully pre-boarded before the incident, caught his eye. She had likely witnessed the initial confrontation with Brenda. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. It was a fleeting moment, but it reinforced Marcus's resolve. This wasn't about power. It was about principle. It was about ensuring that the authority vested in airport and airline personnel was used to serve and protect, not to demean and discriminate. The operational meltdown at Gate C-127 was a stark illustration of how quickly things could unravel when professionalism failed. But for Marcus Thorne, it was also the necessary catalyst for a much larger, more critical repair job, rebuilding trust and ensuring that the gates of Newark, and by extension the gateways to the world, were open and fair to all. The immediate fallout was messy and disruptive, but the seeds of a more accountable and equitable system had been forcefully sown. The ground had been shaken, and nothing at this terminal for this airline would be quite the same again. The days following the Gate C-127 incident were a whirlwind of urgent meetings, internal investigations, and damage control for the airline. Dave McMillan, the airline's Vice President of Operations, was indeed on the next flight to Newark. His meeting with Marcus Thorne and Sylvia Rourke was somber and deferential. There were no excuses offered, only profound apologies and a palpable sense of crisis. Marcus, Sylvia. McMillan began his usual boisterous demeanor, entirely absent. What happened was inexcusable. It was a catastrophic failure on multiple levels within our Newark operation. We have completed our preliminary investigation, and frankly, it confirmed everything Mr. Thorne reported, and more. He outlined the findings. Brenda Mulroney's pattern of dismissive behavior, particularly towards passengers she profiled, had been an open secret among some colleagues, often brushed off by local management, that prioritized on-time departures over nuanced customer care. Gary Parsons's supervisory style was found to be overly passive, encouraging his team to handle things without providing adequate support training or, crucially, oversight against bias. The coaching Brenda had received for prior complaints was revealed to be little more than informal chats with no follow-up or documented improvement plans. As of this morning, McMillan continued, his voice heavy, both Miss Mulroney and Mr. Parsons are no longer employees of this airline. Their actions and the subsequent supervisory failures are indefensible and violate the core tenets of our company's values and operational standards. The karma for Brenda and Gary was complete and severe. Stripped of their airport credentials by the Port Authority and fired by the airline, their careers in the aviation industry were for all intents and purposes over. Word of the incident and the identity of the man they had wronged had discreetly circulated. No airport or airline would likely risk hiring them with such a black mark on their records. But Marcus and Sylvia were interested in more than just punitive actions against two individuals. Dave. Marcus stated, his tone firm. Terminations are a necessary step, but they address the symptoms, not the disease. We need to see a comprehensive top-to-bottom overhaul of your customer service, training, your bias awareness programs, and your supervisory accountability here at Newark, and frankly, system-wide. Sylvia Rourke elaborated, the Port Authority expects a detailed action plan within 10 days as discussed. This plan must include mandatory enhanced training for all current and new ground staff in customer de-escalation, implicit bias recognition, and cultural sensitivity. We also require a clear mechanism for passengers to report misconduct without fear of dismissal, and a transparent process for investigating and acting upon such complaints with demonstrable consequences for breaches. McMillan nodded, already prepared. We are fully committed. We've already engaged external consultants specializing in diversity, equity, and inclusion to help us redesign our training modules. We are proposing a passenger bill of rights to be displayed at all our gates and check-in counters, and we're implementing a new See Something, Say Something, We Will Listen internal reporting system for employees to flag concerns about colleagues' conduct. Furthermore, we will be conducting unannounced mystery shopper-style audits of our gate agents and customer service staff, with results tied to management performance bonuses. The airline, facing immense pressure from the Port Authority and the looming threat of significant reputational damage, not to mention potential fines if further systemic issues were uncovered by ongoing Port Authority spot checks, was ready to make substantive changes. The cost of Flight 498's cancellation and the subsequent passenger reaccommodation had already run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, a painful financial lesson in the price of poor customer service and discrimination. In the weeks that followed, Marcus Thorne monitored the airline's compliance closely. The Port Authority didn't just accept the airline's proposed plan, they scrutinized it, demanded revisions, and set firm timelines for implementation and verification. The incident at Gate C127 became a catalyst not just for that airline, but as a warning and a benchmark for all carriers operating out of Port Authority airports. Other airlines quietly reviewed their own protocols, aware that the bar for acceptable conduct had been demonstrably raised. Marcus never took pleasure in the downfall of Brenda Mulroney or Gary Parsons. He saw them as products of a flawed system, individuals who had allowed their personal biases and workplace pressures to override their professional responsibilities. Yet the consequences had to be severe to underscore the gravity of their actions. His primary satisfaction came from the institutional changes that followed. He saw new training sessions being rolled out, more engaged supervisors on the concourses, and a subtle shift in the way gate agents interacted with passengers. A little more patience, a little more willingness to listen, a little less assumption. The path to true equity and unfailing respect in any large organization is long and requires constant vigilance. But as Marcus Thorne looked out over the bustling terminals of Newark Liberty International Airport a few months later, seeing the newly displayed passenger bill of rights near a boarding gate, he felt a sense of cautious optimism. One ugly incident born of prejudice and poor judgment had, through decisive action, paved the way for a stronger, fairer, and more respectful travel experience for countless others. His intervention hadn't just been about one man being denied boarding. It had been about upholding the dignity of every passenger who walked through those airport doors, and that he knew was a flight worth fighting for. And that, folks, is how a routine flight turned into a masterclass in karma and accountability, all because one gate agent let her biases get the best of her. Marcus Thorne didn't just get an apology. He triggered a wave of change, proving that one person can make a monumental difference when they stand up against injustice, especially when they hold the keys to the airport. What did you think of Brenda's and Gary's fate? Was Marcus's response justified? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of power, prejudice, and ultimate payback, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a good dose of justice, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping narratives like this one. Ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching.